So my name is Neil Count. I'm the CEO for Chiton and Endeavor. We'll explain a little bit about what those two things are. But I find with any of these types of events, it's better to kind of start off with a little bit of story, kind of give you guys a sense of who we are, a little bit of perspective on, kind of tonight's topic. So a little background about myself. I went to University of Michigan for my undergrad, and I did my MBA at Northwestern University. And so I'm a recovering investment banker. After that, I kind of went into the education space. I'm not going to name the company because it's not going to be the best story, but I think I'll give some context for why I'm up here today and what we're talking about. So I worked at an online university, one of the big ones. And if you look me up, you can find out pretty quickly which one it is. But it was an online university, and I was on the business end, right? And so what we had to do is we had a forecast, right? So if any of you are in that type of field, you got to forecast your results. You got to look quarter over quarter, kind of how your business is growing, right? And so if you actually look at an online university, to go to an online university cost about $100,000 over 4 years, right? And I remember my managers were asking me, what does our enrollment totals look like? What's it looking for the next year? And they said, well, don't use $100,000, use $7,500. I said, why, right? I mean, the customer lifetime value should be $100,000. Well, they made it pretty clear that they expected 95% of the students to drop out in the first quarter of their first year. That's how they operated. And it made me sick to my stomach to be a part of an organization like that. Fast forward a few years, I was working at one of the biggest publishing companies in Boston, and I was in the corporate development space doing like mergers and acquisitions and that kind of work, right? Interesting stuff. And I remember I was interviewing for an analyst, and I was interviewing a bunch of people, and I actually came across like a resume from someone who went to this school. And generally speaking, and this is my own bias, and I don't really like it, but when I saw an online university, I wouldn't interview those people, which is probably not the right thing to do. Things have changed, but it's just my bias. And I saw the resume from this specific university I worked at, and I said, I gotta give this guy a shot. 10 minutes in, worst interview ever. Worst interview, right? Like just did not have the etiquette, didn't just kind of make eye contact properly. Resume was in shambles, right? Again, I felt so disappointed. So I stopped the interview 10 minutes in and I said, listen, this isn't going to work. Let's spend the next 45 minutes. I'm just going to give you some tips. We talked through professional etiquette. I've kept in touch with the student. He's doing incredibly well today. But I think the reason I tell you that story, and it's a rather personal story, is because at the end of the day, outcomes absolutely matter. And in education, it matters above for any company that you're working with. And I'm not saying this to kind of give you a commercial about why to work with Chiton or why to work with any of our programs here. But more so, I think what's happening is that outcomes really matter when it comes to the college application space. So part of my job here is to kind of get a sense of like where this entire college application process is going, where the test prep process is going. That's really, I got to look over the next few years, right? So whether it be, the fact, and I'm sure you've seen in some of the newspapers, some of the universities are saying, oh, we're not going to consider the SAT or the ACT anymore. Not really true, by the way. Or for example, another big thing that's coming out is everyone's concerned about the student loan crisis, right? The fact that it's being kind of parallel to the mortgage crisis in 2008, 2009, right? So as part of my job, I have to kind of be on top of these things. And how does that impact, kind of coming back to kind of the student outcomes piece? Well, specifically, the big concern we have is how students are approaching this process, okay? So for Chiton, we've been here for 30 years, right? I mean, we've done SAT, ACT prep. We know at the end of the day, when it comes to kind of the college application process, yes, the academics absolutely matter, especially if you're going to be going for a top 25 university, right? Like, you got to be in the field, right? So a perfect statistic that I always like to talk about is if you look at Harvard University, again, I know the big name, but if you look at Harvard University, 95% of the applications, so of the 40,000 students that apply, 38,000 are academically qualified. What does that mean? Well, most of them are valedictorians. Most of them have perfect SAT scores. Not to mention, there's 22,000 high schools in the United States, right? So each one of them has a valedictorian. Guarantee every one of them throws an application to Harvard. Then you've got everyone applying from overseas, right? So it is getting more competitive. So how do you stand out? right? And that's really what we're going to be talking about today. And again, now that doesn't mean if you don't only have to go to Harvard University, right? Outside of the top 25 schools, there's amazing colleges to attend to. But at the end of the day, you really want to maximize your opportunity when you're in college. So junior year is what we're talking about tonight. But I first wanted to set some perspective here, which is, yes, academics absolutely matter, right? They absolutely do. You got to have good test scores. You've got to show some potential of being able to succeed in college, which is taking AP classes and AP exams, right? Colleges want to see that. You're going to want to make sure you've got the right profile. But at the end of the day, you've got to stand out a little bit, right? Because those other 38,000 students that are also applying to Harvard, they all have that same academic credit. So you got to find out another way to stand out. And that's what Nikhil is actually going to be talking about tonight. So first there's going to be Nikhil is going to go through that, and then Harpreet is going to talk through scholarships, or are we doing it the other way around? Okay. So anyway,
Sure.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. All right. So as Neil said, 95% of students are academically qualified. And that's not like a random statistic. It's not like he's throwing out a number. This is data that Harvard publishes, and other comparable universities in the top 25 also publish this data. And it ranges, some schools it's 90%, other schools it's 97%. But in general, you can feel comfortable with this idea that in a group of 40,000 applications to a school like this, 38,000 of them are going to be academically qualified. But I kind of want to break that down a little bit more. So you want to do this. So I want to break what that means a little bit more. So you can think of it, this isn't necessarily how it happens, but the way you can think of it is this idea that of the 40,000 applications that are submitted, 38,000 being academically qualified means that they have a good enough GPA, a good enough SAT score, good enough course rigor and scores for AP and IB, good enough subject tests, good enough academics as a whole, right, to make the university confident that that student will not fail out of their university. The reason colleges care about academics in the first place is this idea that if we admit, Joe, sorry if anybody's name is Joe, if we admit Joe to this university, will he be able to handle the rigor of our intro to writing class? Will he be able to handle the intro to calculus? Or will he fail out and make our university look bad, right? And that's the reason they care about academics. So what colleges are telling you when they publish this data is that 38,000 out of those 40,000 inspire confidence that they will not fail out. They are good enough on the academic side. So then where are you left? When Harvard admits, again, taking Harvard, when Harvard admits about 2,200 students a year out of those 38,000, how do you get from 38,000 to 2,200? And that's kind of what we're gonna cover today. But again, just looking at these quotes, academically qualified in the admissions game is the easy part. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's easy to get a good SAT score or a good GPA or be valedictorian or salutatorian or take AP classes. That's not easy. That's in fact very hard. And any student that's kind of gone through this, I'm sure you can speak to this as well, I won't put you on the spot, knows that it's very hard. And I'm sure if you guys think back to your time in high school, you'll remember that it was very hard to do well in SATs and study for those SATs. You'll remember those late nights. So I'm not saying it's easy to do that. What I am saying is that the sheer reality of the situation is that many, many students go through that struggle and have successfully gone through it. And that's just the reality of it, right? This is a real quote. It says, Stanford can fill all their available seats with class valedictorians. If Stanford wanted to, and this goes again for Harvard, Yale, Princeton, any of these schools that we're talking about here, if they wanted to, they could fill their class 2 times over with just valedictorians, as Neil said, 22,000 high schools, right? If they wanted to, they could do that. But they don't. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about. How do you differentiate yourself here? So I have on the bottom of the slide, you focus on 2 different things. You define your interest and then excel at it as best as you can. And then the second thing, which is, you're going to hear me harp on this throughout the entire presentation. We're going to do a Q&A afterwards, and I guarantee it'll come up then. But the idea being that you want to paint a narrative, and authenticity is important. I'm going to say that one more time. Your job in the entire application, through every single component besides the academics, okay, is to paint a story of who you are. And not a story that you create for an application. It's not that you sit down on the day before the application to Harvard is due and you say, okay, I'm going to create this person. I'm going to string together a narrative here because I know that's what Harvard wants. No. It's a process that takes time, really digging deep inside you and asking, who are you? Or if you're talking to yourself, who am I? What do I care for? What are my interests? What do I believe in? What do I value? All these types of questions, when you ask them to yourselves and you wrestle with those answers over 1, 2, 3, 4 years maybe, really, really gets to the core of who you are. And when you do that, it's very easy to kind of put that onto an application. And it's much easier to do that when you've taken the time, right? Versus just creating an application the day before. So again, paint your narrative and jump off the application page. So I want to kind of give you 2 analogies for this. One, I always like to use the example of Tom Brady. Okay, so Tom Brady gets paid millions and millions of dollars to do one thing really, really well. He throws a football, right? He doesn't get paid to block or tackle, and then he doesn't get paid to play baseball or soccer or knit, right? He gets paid millions and millions of dollars just to throw a football. And in fact, when he doesn't throw a football, people get mad at him, and they tell him, go back to throwing football, right? Similarly, if you take Beyonce, right, a singer, a performer, she gets paid millions and millions of dollars to sing and perform. She does not get paid to throw a football. She does not get paid to act in movies. She doesn't get paid to knit. Again, just singing, just performing. On a much, 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 much lesser scale, on a college application to Harvard or to any university, these kind of tips apply to every single university, even outside the top 25, right? Your job is to be the Tom Brady, the Beyonce of that year. Your job is to paint your narrative so well that they remember that, oh, Joe is the mathematician, Dana is the artist, right? That's your job. You want to jump off the application page. That's my first kind of analogy. The second one that I always give is if you were to write your entire application, you were to throw it in a pile, right, with every other one of those applicants, those other 40,000, if we're going to use Harvard, right? And then it would be in that decision room, and all the names were wiped off. And then all those applications flew out the window, right? And hypothetically, you could get your best friend to sift through all those applications that doesn't have your name. Could he or she find your application? Does he or she, would he or she be able to sift through all those applications, read through the extracurriculars, honors and awards, read your essays, read your recs, look at your interview report, and say, that is definitely Joe. Susie's my best friend, that is definitely Susie. If that's not true, you need to do a better job of painting your narrative. So now let's go into the specifics. Hopefully I've approached it from like a high level. Now let's go into actually what do you do, the tangible things that you or your son or daughter can do tomorrow to start doing this, right? So academics and test prep, we did the first part. Great. Okay. These are the other components, I like to think of them as opportunities you have to paint your narrative and jump off the application page. Right? You have your extracurricular activities, you have your honors and awards, you have all your essays and rec letters, and you have your interview. Each of these are chances for you to paint your narrative and communicate to the college, I am the dancer, I am the mathematician, I am the X. So let's dive a little bit more specifically into that. So for the extracurricular activities, how do you do it? I would suggest you pick no more than 2 authentic themes. So ask yourself, what do I care about? Chances are the things that you care about most, they're not like 18 or 20. Yeah, you might have several interests, but chances are they fall into some sort of category. So I've listed an example here, right? Like you might be an artist and a mathematician, great. Those are your 2 themes, okay? You might be a debater and a community service, someone passionate about community service. Those are your 2 things, great. Whatever it is, pick 2 themes, and then focus on adding depth and honesty to both of those themes. So don't be the soccer player, the knitter, the debater, the president of National Honor Society, the treasurer of your Spanish club. Don't be all of that. That's not depth, and that's not honesty. Because chances are, correct me if I'm wrong, you're a student here, chances are you don't actually genuinely care about 7 or 8 of those things. Chances are. Okay? Realistically, you care about 1 or 2 things, and you don't care about all those 8. So instead of trying to build the perfect application, right, with all those 8 clubs, focus on 2 things. And then just think about this logically for a second. How many applicants out of those 40,000 to Harvard do you think have crafted the perfect one, right? How many treasurers of National Honor Societies do you think apply to Harvard, who are also part of the marching band, who also play one varsity sport? Chances are a lot of them, right? And you're nodding your head because you know it's true, right? Don't be that other applicant. Don't be the same type of applicant as everybody else. Pick 2 themes that are authentic to you, okay? Then add depth and honesty to those. And everything extra, like I just said, distracts the reader and detracts from your application. Okay, now how do you add depth and honesty? So I would say gather as much relevant evidence to support that depth and honesty. So evidence can come in a variety of ways, right? You can join a club. So if you're really interested in Spanish language and culture, right, you can join the Spanish club. You can do a study abroad. You can do other things related to Spanish language and culture. Don't go off play varsity soccer, right, because that's completely separate from Spanish club and Spanish language and culture. If that's your theme, build around that category. And then pick 2 of them. So if Spanish and soccer are your 2 things, great. Do those 2 things. And gather as much evidence as you can. Another thing that a lot of people miss is out-of-school evidence. They think extracurriculars is restricted to just clubs in school. So a perfect example of this is if your son or daughter is interested in any type of science, like biology, chemistry, physics, right? Many applicants to these schools, many successful applicants to these schools, have gone out and done research at a local university. So if you live around here, right, you can contact professors at Boston University, Boston College, Harvard University, in the biology departments. All their emails and research work and everything is on the website. If you're interested in biology, you could say, I'm really interested in Professor X's work. I'm going to email him. And I'm going to do that 55 times, and hopefully one person responds, and they give me a shot. That is adding out-of-school evidence, because now you're not just somebody who joined a biology club. Now you're somebody who joined a biology club and for 2 or 3 years has done out-of-school research with a collegiate professor in the field. That's adding depth to that channel of biology. And that's kind of what you want to do at scale with whatever theme you're thinking about. So the last thing I want to talk about with evidence is make sure that evidence matters. Okay, so there are certain things that are kind of fluff. And I think we all can kind of parse through certain applications and say, oh, this student clearly doesn't care about this. This is just fluff because he wants to impress us on the application. The evidence that is fluff won't help you. So make sure that evidence actually matters. And that evidence, just as I said, can come from school clubs or out-of-school clubs, can also come from these other components like awards and recommendation letters. So I won't talk too much about awards, but instead I figured the most value I can bring to everybody is if I just told you from my personal experience and our collective experience here at Chaitin, what awards matter, and just put it up on the board and let you take a picture of it, or write them down if you want to. Feel free to do so. I'll run through them a little bit. So if your son or daughter is really interested in math and science and they want to add depth and honesty within the math and science category, these are kind of the awards to look for. Keep in mind, these aren't awards where you spend 10 minutes submitting an application for. These require multiple rounds of serious work, and that's why they matter. The awards that don't matter are the ones that you can just press submit and you just get a name. Okay, the awards that do matter are the ones where you need to be very, very invested in your work and very, very invested in what you care about to achieve these awards. And then for the humanities, same thing. You're not going to find any easy awards here. These are all very hard to get. And then your general awards. So I'll give it like another 5 seconds if you want to take a picture. Cool. And I can go back to it if you guys need me to. The other part is recommendation letters. So what can you do now if you're a junior, if you're a parent of a junior? I would advise that you select 2 teachers who understand you. And when I say understand you, I don't mean 2 teachers who say, I taught Sally for 1 year and he is very good at, or Sally's a he, she is very good at Spanish. Not that. I mean people who really understand you. So I'll give a personal anecdote for that. I got a recommendation letter from a Spanish teacher of mine, but I didn't consider her a teacher as much as I did a friend. And I really truly mean that. I would go after school to talk to her. She helped me a lot with my Spanish. She opened me up to so much culture within the Spanish language and the Spanish, just the whole kind of world. I would go over her house to talk with her and like eat with her. This is much more than like a teacher-student relationship where she can say I got an A in her class. So select 2 teachers who you consider more than just your teachers and much more closer to friends, okay? Make a conscious effort to connect with both of those teachers. So if you're a junior, it's a perfect opportunity to set weekly or bi-weekly check-in meetings. That could literally be as simple as after school on Mondays, every single week, I'm going to go to Miss So-and-so and update her on what I've been doing this week, related to that class, outside of that class, etc. And you do that with both teachers who you foresee you are going to get recommendation letters from. Now, I will add a quick caveat. You don't want to come off as a student who's just asking for a rec. So you don't want to set these weekly check-in meetings, seem bored, seem disinterested, and just pretending like you want to get to know them so that you get a recommendation letter. Okay? Instead, you want to really genuinely talk with them, communicate with them. So not only will that help you with the whole weekly check-ins, but more so, it'll help the teacher really understand who you are. Just think about it logically. Again, who would have a better shot at getting a better recommendation letter? A student who has never met with a teacher outside of class but got an A, okay? Or a student who's met with that teacher every single week for an entire year, okay, with weekly check-ins on what you've been up to outside of school, what you've been up to within the classroom, what are you kind of interested in? Who has a better shot at getting a really personal recommendation letter, which again, remember the goal is to paint your narrative. Who has that better shot to paint that authentic narrative? It's clearly the second student, right? So myth number one that I want to dispel is you need to get an A in the class for recommendations. Absolutely not true. In fact, I would take the counterpoint. If you get a B in a class and you're applying to a very competitive school and that's your only B, if you get a recommendation letter from that teacher and he or she can kind of explain what you kind of struggled with, how you improved over time, that can actually help you. Excuse me. Myth number two is you can't use external recommenders. So I gave you the example of kids who go to a biology professor at BU. There's a space for additional recommendations where it's very common for successful applicants to these schools to get Dr. So-and-so from BU, who's your research mentor for 2.5 years, to write you a rec. In addition to research mentors, you can also get employers if you have a part-time job, or other things. I put pastors because it's another relatively random example, so it's not necessarily academic in nature or professional in nature. It's just someone else who knows you who can add to that personal narrative, add to that depth and honesty. The last thing I want to talk, yes?
Can I ask a question about recommendations?
Sure, go ahead.
So, when I write recommendations for people,
Yes.
I usually collaborate with the person.
Yes.
And I show them the recommendation.
Yep.
Now, I have been told that our kids at Lexington High are going to be asked to check the box that says, I do not need to see my
Yes.
recommendation.
Yes.
And
Got
like, what do you do with that? Like, because I'll write and I'll say to a young woman who has worked for me, like, does this capture what you need?
Right.
But,
So what would you do from the student's perspective?
Yeah.
Like, would you check that box or not?
yeah.
Okay, so this is a great moment to kind of empower everybody here instead of just answering the question.
Yeah.
So I would turn the question back on you, right? And everybody feel free to participate. Okay, I'll turn the question back on you. I said the original goal of the application is to paint an honest and authentic narrative, right? So do you think, and I'm asking you, do you think that a college would necessarily spend the time to say, oh, Susie did check that box, uh-oh, or Susie did not check that box, oh no. Or would they care a little bit more about the contents of the recommendation?
Well, it's the content, obviously.
Right.
So I think the recommendation to not check the box is just for time efficiency, right?
I really appreciate the way you said that, actually. It's the content, obviously. And that word obviously is really, really important because it shows the psychology of how you're thinking, which is, it's very true. Obviously, it's the content that matters, who you are as a person, how that comes across on the application, infinitely more than whether you went through the games, tips, tricks, and strategies of, Harvard definitely does not want me to check this box, so I'm not going to check this box. Or Harvard wants me to check this box, I'm going to check that box. The argument obviously being, right, that Harvard likes it when students didn't have the chance to write recommendation letters for themselves. That's the idea why some people will tell you you have to check that box, that I'm not allowed to see a recommendation letter as a student because they're afraid that the student will just write their own recommendation letter or have too much input and it won't be the teacher's honest opinion. But, so after that whole exercise, right, my recommendation would be pick, the number one thing about that question is pick a teacher who actually understands you. Because if the teacher understands you, appreciates you, respects you, and has that honest connection with them, then even if you don't see the recommendation letter, it's fine. The other thing I would say is another actionable step you can take is you can give them a list of things you want included in the recommendation letter. So I would advise any junior or senior to say, I really want my this part of my application to be emphasized by you because you are my biology teacher. I've done this in biology. I'd really like it if you could round out my application in this way. So that's another actionable step you can take. The very last thing I want to talk about before Harpreet talks about scholarships, and I'm sorry I'm talking a little bit longer than I should be. Hopefully you're finding this valuable. We will do a Q&A as well. Is the summer program myth. And this is one of my favorite things to talk about because it ties together this entire authentic, honest conversation together, which is depth and honesty in an application doesn't mean paying for a brand name. Depth and honesty does mean pursuing competitive merit-based opportunities. So I'll give you these statistics. Paying for brand name meaning Harvard has summer school programs, Yale has summer school programs, Columbia has a summer scholars program, right? All these programs, you're paying for the brand name, okay? Now, the other programs, so I'll stop there for a second. So if you look at these programs, what these numbers actually mean is the number of students who went to Harvard summer school, okay, applied to Harvard and got in is less than 5% of the students who were actually enrolled in the Harvard summer school. If you look at Yale summer session, same thing. Of all the students who attended Yale summer session and applied to Yale, only less than 5% got in. Okay? I'll compare that with these two competitive merit-based opportunities, which again, if you want to take a picture, you can. The point being that these, again, are not easy to get into. These you can get into relatively easily if you pay for. Okay? These have much lower acceptance rates because they're much harder to get into because of what you need to get in. Okay, so RSI, Research Science Institute, takes 18 kids every year. You remember those honors and awards that I listed? Many of the students who get into RSI also have the Intel ISEF, the Siemens competition, the Davidson Fellow. It's very common for those two to kind of mingle. The reason being because these are competitive merit-based opportunities that rely on what you actually care about, what you've actually done, and reward you for your efforts and your knowledge and your commitment. TASC is the RSI equivalent, Telluride Association Summer Program, for the humanities, okay? And these programs run at Harvard and University of Michigan / Cornell, respectively. You don't need to pay for them. They're completely free, okay? But they're very hard to get into. Now you look at the numbers of those. Out of the 18 kids in RSI who applied to Harvard, okay, 17 got in. Okay, for a Telluride Association Summer Program, the numbers of students that they accept every year waiver, so I can't give you a specific statistic, but around 90% every single year also get into highly competitive universities as well. So I'll leave you with that. Remember, this is entirely about a mindset, and when Harpreet's going through scholarships and we're doing Q&A, I encourage you to kind of think about it in this way, which is, of course, the college application not as something to be completed. It's not a series of tasks or checkboxes to fill out. Okay? It's actually an opportunity to pour out everything about you. Every single thing that makes you who you are. And if you do that, and you do that well, you will be successful. So I know I went a little bit over time, I apologize for that. But Harpreet now is going to talk about the scholarship process, and then we can move into a Q&A for scholarships and college advice in general.
Hey everybody, so my name is Harpreet Singh. I'm a college counselor here. I'm working at 2 different schools as a college counselor, and then I've had a few of you actually with your students as a private college counselor. Something that I like to stress is college affordability. As we all know, the prices are going really high, and so what's the point of going to college if you're going to be in debt for the rest of your life? That's where we like to stress out scholarships, but we also like to stress out financial aid. So this is just a quick crash course on what financial aid is. So on your right-hand side, you see what a financial package usually looks like. So your cost of attendance is all the costs associated with college. So your room and board, your tuition, your meal plans, etc., etc. And then when you file for your financial aid, it's through an application called FAFSA, Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It will generate based on your assets, income, and other financial factors, and EFC, or your estimated family contribution. So for the sake of an example, let's say that the cost of attendance is $50,000, and that after filing for FAFSA, they say that you can pay $20,000. That means that you still need $30,000 left to fully pay off college, and that's where financial aid comes into play. So in an ideal world, 100% of that need will be covered through grants, through work study, through loans. However, that's not the reality, unfortunately. Oftentimes, they'll only give you probably 50% of that amount. So if you're left with $30,000 in need, let's say they only give you in financial aid $15,000, that's unmet need, another $15,000. And that's the reason why a lot of students can't go to college.
The average, the EFC number.
It's low. It's because like I'm assuming like given that you're at Lexington, you probably make a high amount of income, and so the higher the income, the lower the EFC, meaning the
Is it the higher?
No. Okay, so you're flipping it in
I'm
line,
flipping it,
which is
sorry.
yes. Okay, so it definitely depends on the school that you're applying to. So Harvard has more financial aid offerings because of their endowment than University of Massachusetts, just because of the way their money works, right? So depending on the school, a general rule of thumb is the more competitive the school, and meaning the bigger their endowment is, the less your expected family contribution is. Okay, the lower the endowment, meaning the lower general correlation is the less competitive the school is. The lower their endowment is, which means the less financial aid they can give, which means the more you're expected to pay, right?
So that ESC number is different college by college.
Yes. Now, if, helpful tip, if any of you guys want to see what your expected family contribution is for any college, you can go on their websites. For example, if you want to take Harvard, you can go to Harvard's online financial aid calculator. You can input all your real numbers, like your income, your assets, all that stuff. You can input all those real numbers. They don't save any of the data. And you can hit enter, and it'll give you an estimated expected family contribution. And in my experience, it's been relatively accurate. So it should be a good gauge.
Yep, it's called like estimated price calculator. Is like the technical term they use.
But is it the same for every person that has those same attributes, or is it like, okay, you're from Massachusetts, but you're applying to a Wisconsin school, we want more Massachusetts people, so we're gonna lower your EFC? Or is it that anyone that has that same combination of assets gets the same number?
The EFC should remain stagnant, but the amount of financial aid they give you will be different.
Got it. Okay.
Also, it's not except for in-state tuition, out-of-state tuition for public universities, it shouldn't matter where you're from and where you're applying. So for example, a student here applying to a public university in Wisconsin may have to pay more than a student applying from Wisconsin because they have in-state tuition, out-of-state tuition. But if you're applying to a private university, then everybody has to pay the same. And then your expected family contribution, your financial aid, is solely based on your income, your assets, like all the other stuff that's listed in that estimated financial aid calculator. So to everybody here, if you really want to know, my kid wants to go to Yale, assuming he gets in, like how are we going to pay for it? How much are we going to have to pay? Go on that Yale's financial aid calculator, input all the stuff, it'll give you a number that is pretty accurate. Yeah, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't have no questions. Like since we're on it, I feel like this would be a good. Okay, so the other way to pay for unmet need is through scholarships. And so scholarships are free money; you don't have to pay it back. And I just like so this PowerPoint is supposed to do two things: one, demystify what scholarships are, but also clear up how to best apply for scholarships and like optimize your chances of winning scholarships. So for one thing I want to say is that you don't need to be valedictorian to get a scholarship, nor do you need SAT scores and ACT scores that are nearly perfect, if not perfect. There are scholarships out there for every single student, and that comes with the personal narrative that we'll just discuss. So obviously there's like scholarships can be used for tuition, it's free money, but there's also two different kinds of scholarships: restricted scholarships and unrestricted scholarships. So restricted scholarships, they might be just confined to tuition. Oh, this scholarship will come in and it'll only pay for your tuition. Versus if you get another scholarship that's an unrestricted scholarship, that scholarship will help with like the miscellaneous things here. So like if you need a new wardrobe, like a professional wardrobe for college, you can pay for that using that scholarship. For airfare, if you're going across the country or somewhere that's not a driving distance, that scholarship can pay for those costs. But yeah, and then the last thing I want to talk about in terms of demystifying scholarships are the benefits. So in addition to money, there are a bunch of like intangible benefits of scholarships. So one that I like to talk about is like the Coca-Cola scholarship, and it's a really big name scholarship. So in it, like for example, every single year around October-ish, right? They get flown into Atlanta, which is where the Coca-Cola headquarters are, and all the scholars of that year, so 150 scholars every single year, gather for a conference. They do professional development workshops, they gain a community, and then they have like a Facebook group where they can like network with one another. So for example, if you're in Georgia and you want to go to, let's say, New York for a conference, but you don't want to pay for a New York hotel, you can ask, hey, can I like go stay in your dorm? Chances are they'll say yes, like no one will probably say no, to be honest. But that just saved you a cost that you didn't have before because you didn't have that network of scholars from that scholarship. And so there are tons and tons of like softer, intangible benefits that are usable for scholarships. I also want to further the definition of scholarships. So in addition to what's free money, I also like to say it's earned money, because typically you have to apply to a scholarship and therefore you earn that money. And there are 2 or 4 different ways to categorize scholarships. So there's one that's based on merit, need, passion, and experience, and this is where your personal narrative comes into play. If you know what your narrative is, say let's say the knitting club, since we've been talking about knitting a little bit, apply to those knitting scholarships. Sorry, we go back and forth about knitting.
There's good money in knitting.
But yeah, so for example, I've been knitting for 7 years. I should be applying to that knitting scholarship because I demonstrate the most amount of interest in it and the most amount of experience in it. And then I can talk about my passion for knitting for the last 7 years. And chances are you'll be more qualified for that scholarship than someone who just started and doesn't know how to put the needle in the thread. Or the thread in the needle, sorry, wrong way. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's thread.
Obviously I'm not a knitter. But so yeah, those are different ways. And so there are probably more categories of scholarship, but these are the ones that are most often. And they often combine them. So for example, a scholarship might look at your merit as well as your experience in a particular activity. So volunteering. I know a lot of the students that I've helped, they do 50 hours of volunteering at least every single year. And there are tons of scholarships associated with that. And 50 hours per year is probably a lot more competitive than let's say 5 hours per year. And so those, in addition to I think another qualification for one scholarship I'm thinking about, you need to have I think a 3.5 GPA. And so if they meet the criteria and have all of that experience in it, then they should apply for it. And so this is how we can find scholarships. I like to call it the approach that I like to recommend is called the inside out approach. So you start within your family, you start within yourself. So for example, if given that we're almost all parents here, I'm not a parent, sorry, I don't know why I said we, but ask your employer if they have a scholarship for students going to college. Chances are they might, and that's already one scholarship that your student has an advantage over than anybody else in the country, because their chances are there are not that many seniors that specific year in your company that's applying to the school, college. Then, I would say, look at your school district. I know, for example, Lexington High School has a lot of scholarships just for Lexington High School students. So I would tell your student to contact their guidance counselor, guidance counselor. I'm sorry, I don't know if they have a college counselor either. And they should be able to link you with those scholarships. And those are not as competitive because Lexington High School doesn't have as many students as a class the size of 800. So that's another way to find easy scholarships. The other way I would do so is by colleges themselves as well as websites. So for colleges, there are merit scholarships. So if you're really keen on one scholarship or one college that you want to apply to, there are probably merit scholarships for that. And then there are also websites. So these are the websites that I would recommend, as well as these are just examples, institutional scholarships. And for those college scholarships, sometimes you don't need a specific application or a separate application. It just comes with you applying to college applying to that college in general. The two that I would recommend would be Scholarly and FastWeb. So you have to create a profile for that, and it takes 10 minutes to do, so it's not much time. But then within that profile, it asks you a bunch of questions, such as where you go to school, what you want to study, where you want to study, what you're involved in. It gives you a really comprehensive sense of who that student is, and then it links you to all of those random scholarships and matches you to them. And yeah, so Scholarly is actually as an app, and then FastWeb is a website. And FastWeb is the largest online database for scholarships. Does anyone have any questions about that?
Those are not corresponding left or right.
Oh, sorry, no, they're not interrelated whatsoever. And then, so there are a few components to scholarships. Not every single one has all of these, but a lot of them have at least one of them. And I rank them in terms of hierarchical importance. So if a scholarship asks you for an essay, that essay is probably the most important component of the application than, let's say, your letter's recommendation. Versus if it doesn't have an essay, then the next most important thing that will be the activities list or a resume. And something that I've noticed is that a lot of students, they can write a resume or they can write an essay well, but they struggle writing activities lists and resumes, and it doesn't do them justice. So I have two different lists And so this is how I've seen a lot of students write their activities list. I'm a cashier, I'm on the weightlifting team, or any other sports team, and I do research. Sure, it tells you a little bit about the student, but there's nothing there. Like, what do they research? Where do they work? Like, what do they do for weightlifting? And so after working with students, like, they can have a list that looks like this. It's much more comprehensive. It tells you how long they've done that. So for example, a cashier, they worked with it for almost 3 years. It also tells you how much time they put into it every single week, and like what their specific duties or responsibilities are within each activity. And this gives the application reader a lot better sense of what they do and like what their passions actually are. So I would say your activities list shouldn't actually, in terms of those brute names, they should be all more interrelated, so that a personal narrative also weaves in. But yeah, if you want to take pictures, please go ahead. And so something that I want to leave you with is like tips for applications. Like this is not just for scholarship applications, but this is for college applications too. Encompasses like organization skills as well as ways to write and rewrite your own things without having peer review, but then also encouraging you to find other people to look at your applications, because having eyes on those are important. And yeah, so feel free to take more pictures. And the thing I want to emphasize is the last bullet point. Apply often and apply early. Apply often, I don't mean like one every month, I mean like one, like 5 every single day. In fact, this is how Nikhil's actually, when he was applying to college, what his email looked like. So as you see, all of those things date March 30th, 2015. You've successfully applied to this scholarship, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's like 50, 100, 150, roughly. And so it's possible to apply to a lot of scholarships at one day. And it's because he had the ability to apply early, and then he had the motivation to apply often because college is expensive and we don't want to pay for college.
I also want to emphasize it's not because I'm awesome. It's because those like Scholarly, FastWeb, all these other websites, they allow you, like Harpreet said, create one profile and then submit as many applications as possible. So literally, I probably spent, I don't remember, this wasn't part of the presentation. I found it 2 days ago because I get nostalgic and like reread old emails. So I found this. And I just saw like March 30th, 2015, a bunch of scholarships and stuff like that, right? And I thought, wait, I did this? And it's not because I'm awesome, it's because you just create one profile and hit submit, and then occasionally you'll get something that's like, please write a 50-word essay, and I'm like, skip, submit, and that's it, you just keep doing that. And this was in one day. Theoretically, if you did that every single day, then you can win a lot of scholarships.
How many did you get?
My scholarships winning are much less impressive than this man's.
No, but how many numbers? Like,
I
150?
don't know.
Six?
These were a lot of like local scholarships as well as you. So for Lexington High School, like this is the BCSF Burlington, where I'm from, Community Scholarship Foundation. Yeah, let's go with that. That's probably Lexington probably has something very comparable. So you can do that, right? So like I probably got a lot of them. I don't remember, to be completely honest. Which is not very appreciative of me, but regardless, like I want to take the conversation away from me with scholarships because I'm much inferior to Harpreet, who won over $2 million in scholarships. So, okay, but anyway, so with that, that's the entire college admissions.
Were you junior when you applied, or?
2015, I was a senior. Yeah. But with that, that was the college admissions scholarship presentation. I want to leave you guys with one thing before we do Q&A. If you look back there, you'll see a camera, and I kind of want to explain why. Here at Endeavor, we're very, very dedicated to creating a bunch of free content that provides value to everybody. So actually, I don't know if you can see, but like you can't see it, but in here is a full production studio with like lights and cameras and just green screens and everything, where we spend a significant time of our day filming YouTube videos. So we're putting up a lot of free content. By the end of this month, we should have about, I want to say 40 videos on the YouTube channel. Well, completely free. We have podcasts on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify. We have articles on Medium, LinkedIn. So a bunch of free content, again, completely free for all of you, summarizing a lot of the stuff that we've said here, adding to it, making it just a fuller picture, completely available for all of you to kind of look at. And so the reason we're recording this is we're going to put this presentation on our YouTube channel as well. We anticipate that you guys have some questions, but we know that college admissions and scholarships and all that stuff is a process. And so you might listen to this presentation, you might feel really good tonight, but then in a week you'll be like, oh, I don't know, I have this kind of question. So feel free to come to the comment section on the YouTube channel, write your question, we will get back to you and answer that question.